Hello, this is Bashy's Corner. We make programs about society. We invite politicians, journalists, cultural personalities, and we discuss those issues which mainstream media doesn't want or maybe doesn't have time or will. Among most ethnic minority groups in Denmark, it is very customary that they guide their children of what kind of education they should have. It is often engineering, medicine, business, law, or IT. But fortunately, this cycle is slowly and steadily being broken. Now, many young people are taking up journalism, they're taking up issues like psychology, and that is why I have invited a guest who not only studied journalism, but also quickly made a big name in investigating reporting in Denmark. He is also a film director and an author. Welcome to Bashy's program, Nagieb.
Thank you.
I understand that your family came from Afghanistan.
Yes,
right?
they did. Yeah.
Why Denmark?
It was a kind of a coincidence because my father, he lived a little bit in Bulgaria too, and he lived in Iran earlier than that, and Pakistan too.
Okay, yeah.
And he actually lived in Quetta in Pakistan, where you have a very big population of Afghans,
True.
people, or Afghan descent, and he came with a wave of immigrants in the 60s, and the first place he moved to was Munich in Germany, and he worked there in the service business for a while, and then later he and his friends, they heard that the opportunities for job were better in Denmark, so they moved up north, and it was because of the economy, it was because of work.
Okay, so he didn't come as a refugee?
No, he did.
Okay,
no.
Because many Danes think that Afghans come because of the revolution or because of the civil war there.
Yeah, but it is true that a vast majority of Afghans, they've come here because of the conflict in Afghanistan, and they are refugees. It is a very small minority who came to the Western countries because of other reasons, because of university or because of work. And my father, he belonged to a very small group. I think there was only a handful of Afghans in Denmark, like my father.
Yes.
And like I said, it was a kind of a coincidence because he moved to Quetta. So he actually came with Pakistani nationals to Denmark. So that's why.
Because I remember I came to Denmark from Canada and I met an Afghan friend, the first Agha Herati, and he's the first Afghani who came here. And at that time there was no Afghani or any other people from Syria. It's just you grew up in the suburb of Copenhagen.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you, because that suburb where you grew up has a very strange reputation, How was it to grow up in an area which is socially deprived and a lot of conflicts there?
It was kind of a mixed feeling to grow up there. Of course, I can't compare it to other ways of growing up. No. This is what I've experienced. It's the only thing I know. But I have good memories, but of course I also have some not so good memories, bad memories from the area. I would say that the good memories are that, Avedøre Stationsby, which is in Hvidovre.
These high buildings.
Yeah. It wasn't a beautiful place back then. They've changed it a little bit. They lifted up the quarter with more like green surroundings now. But back then it was very grey. It was really boring. But we had like a small community there. We had, it was like to grow up in a village. Everybody, they knew each other. So that was like the cozy thing about living there, that everybody, they knew each other, and we had this kind of feeling of social responsibility, you could say also. And besides that, we also had a lot of family. We had a very big family. My mother's
family?
My mother's brothers and sisters, they came in the 80s and in the 90s. They fled the war, so all of them, they moved to Avedøre.
So when your dad came to Denmark, he didn't bring his family?
No, he was alone.
Okay.
Yeah, and end of the 70s, he went back to Afghanistan, got married, brought my mother here.
All right.
And when Russia, Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we had like the first persons from my mother's family coming to Denmark, and later when the war escalated and after the war ended, we had a civil war in Afghanistan. The rest of the family came, so we had like a very big family living there in this area. So that was the cozy thing about it.
Support for each other.
And the negative thing was, of course, that you had more people who had lack of resources. You could say you had like a unproportional big group of alcoholics and people with drug problems.
But there also in that area where you grew up, they also lived socially deprived Danes. It's not only minorities who live there.
That's the Dane I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about like the people with the drug, psychological problems and alcoholic problems, and you had a lot of pensionists also. So that was actually ethnic Danes.
Exactly.
A majority.
I remember at that time I was advising Beate Weiss, and they wanted to make this ghetto plan, and I told her that don't call it ghetto, because then you are giving a certain association, because most of the people who live in those areas, not only in Avedua but other places also, we were created by Social Democratic Party, and with poor Danes, and they're putting everybody there, and then they call it ghetto. But anyway, coming back to this social environment you are talking about, you grew up with violence and bullying as part of daily life. Did it toughen you?
I would say yes, I guess so, because it was, I compare it with some of the other people that I've got to know later in my life, people who didn't grow up in an area like Avedøre, and I can see that violence was a much more normal part of my life than theirs, I've met people who've never been in a fight all their life, That was a surprise for me when I was in my late teen years, going to high school, and people telling me they've never been in a fight. Fights was just a normal part of the stuff that we did in the schoolyard. You always had bullies. You had like gangs of wannabe gangsters, or whatever you can call them, that who was trying to
to dominate.
To dominate, and who was provoking people and were very aggressive, and you had two choices as a young boy. You could either hide and be marginalized, or you could fight, and try to get. We called it respect, but it was fear, and it was unfortunate, but it was necessary to have like what you can call a kind of a normal life.
After school, you went to University of Southern Denmark and studied journalism. What made you study journalism? Why not engineering and medicine?
The reason why I started studying journalism was because I was very interested in the information flow going to people from the media, from the mass media, and I thought that journalists, they had a lot of power. The media was very influential.
They have power.
Yes, in every aspect of life.
Yes.
And I thought that a lot of the information that we got was stereotypical, and it was not in accordance with the way that I was perceiving the world, and the way I was perceiving minorities in Denmark, and the way I was perceiving, for example, the Middle East and surrounding areas. I thought there were a lot of stereotypes, and I was very dissatisfied with the way that stories were told about different problems and also positive things.
The media coverage.
Yes. So actually, I started doing journalism because I wanted to contribute in a positive way and try to change some of the information flow that we got.
That was a noble thought.
Yeah.
Normally, when people finish journalism, they start with a newspaper.
Yeah.
But I understand that you went to TV directly.
No, almost.
Almost.
Yeah. I started as a trainee in a TV station.
Yeah, that's what
that was TV Denmark. Yeah. I did some local news there. But when I finished my education, I actually had difficulties getting a job. So for 19 months, more than 1.5 years, I was without a job. I was working as a bouncer in a nightclub. Yeah, I was tearing buildings down. I couldn't get to job interviews because I hadn't networked and I hadn't been. I didn't have really good connections, and there were also a lot of prejudices back then. People, you know, they were surprised that you had somebody from the minorities taking a journalism degree. So people, they thought I had come from abroad with an education from other places.
Okay.
So it was really weird. But I got the chance in DR, and I actually wrote some freelance articles for Urban that really shook the media world, especially one of them. We did a story about TV2. That they did a story which was not true about a gang called AAA.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, from yeah.
So we revealed that story, and after that, I got hired by DR and started doing documentaries.
So before you became famous about this AAA thing into TV2, what kind of program or what kind of work you did in the TV branch?
I actually started before that. I did the local news, and the local news, it was about everything. It was sports, it was politics, local politics, etc. And then I did the newspaper stories, and after that I started doing documentaries.
And they took you seriously?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were nominated in 2005 for a very prestigious Calvin Prize, you know. Twice, I think.
I've been nominated, like, it was first round nominations.
It's
not like shortlisted, but I've been nominated, I think,
but you were nominated
six times or something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've not been shortlisted, no.
But still, I mean, coming with a minority background, coming to journalism and TV, how did it feel to be nominated? At least to be nominated.
Yeah, it's an honor. It's a privilege to be nominated. You know, I've won several other prizes too, international prizes and national prizes, and it's really an honor to win it, and it's good to be acknowledged, especially by colleagues, other professionals, and it gives you a weight. You know, it shows that you know that people, they take you serious.
It's like Oscar, you know, until you're nominated for Oscar, you're just an actor.
Yeah.
But then they call you Oscar-nominated actor. You know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Then you made trip to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And to find prisoners.
Yes.
Who were handed over by a Danish soldier to the Americans, right?
Yeah.
Did you find them?
Yes. I was hired as a journalist, researcher for this project that was directed by Christopher Gulbrandsen and Niels Iversen.
Yes.
And
for a documentary.
Yes. And they needed me to track down some prisoners who had been ill-treated, abused by American soldiers, handed over by Danes. I found them, I interviewed them, and it was a very big story. It really shook the Danish government, and the Danish people from the Danish government attacked the two directors, especially, and went after their they attacked them. You know, their backgrounds, the personal backgrounds, and it was a very dirty time. Yeah, a lot of dirty tricks were used, and unfortunately, it didn't have any effect. It didn't change anything, but it kind of made the Danish government more aware about the methods that they were using.
In the documentary was called The Secret War.
Yeah, it was called The Secret War.
Okay, why call it Secret War? Everybody knew there was a war.
Everybody knew that there was a war, but the problem was that nobody knew what the Danish soldiers were doing, and what they were allowed to do, what they weren't allowed to do. So, for example, taking of these prisoners was secret. Nobody knew about it, you know. And you had a lot of incidents down there that hadn't been reported in the media because it was secret files. So that's why.
But it's the same thing happened in Iraq also.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you again went back to Afghanistan for a documentary. Back to the Battlefield is called?
Yes.
Okay. Weren't you afraid to go to Afghanistan again after that?
Yeah. At that time, no, I wasn't. I went to a city called Musakala.
Yes.
In northern Helmand, and the reason why I went down there was that the only information that we were getting was through the defense, and it was the media department, and the journalists down there were dependent on the information, and they were just quoting them and kind of copying what they were writing. And I thought, you know, as the fourth power, as the media, it was our responsibility to check up on the Danish military, what they were doing in Afghanistan. And what I found out was that what was happening on the ground was not the same as we were told by the military. So that was very important for me to talk with the civilians in that city who could tell me that there were some nuances to the stories that we hadn't heard about what were being done.
But then you also went many times to Afghanistan. Were you ever in danger?
Yes, I've been in danger several times, I would say.
Okay.
In 2007, I was very close to get kidnapped. But it didn't happen because I had safeguarded myself.
And also because you speak the language and you have background?
Yeah, but it's not so much that, because it was really dangerous for everybody. But I had managed to get kind of a permit from a religious Taliban affiliated leader.
So it was a Taliban area?
Yes, but they were very, very close to kidnapping me, and they threatened me and the people I was with. But I managed to get out. But when I came down, I was arrested by Afghan police because I talked with the enemy, because you didn't have press
they
freedom.
thought you were a spy.
Yes, and they released me, fortunately, afterwards. Okay. But in 2008, I was kidnapped for real by the Taliban. I was held for a week. I was really lucky to escape because I made a deal with one of the guards, and he fled with me and his family too.
Okay.
And so in Afghanistan, yeah, I've tasted danger many times.
But I understand that the Danish ministries, for example, Foreign Ministry and Defense Ministry, also were not very happy that you were going there again and again and saying things and writing. And why?
Of course, I would say that the only reason that they weren't happy was because I was not like accepting the stories that they were, doing. If I went with the Danish military and something happened to me, they would hail me as a hero. Despite of me getting injured, it would cost the Danish state a lot of money. But because I was doing a story which kind of fitted in their perspective, I was doing something. I was trying to show what they were doing, and maybe they would think it was very positive for them. I think they would hail me as a hero if something happened to me, despite of the money and whatever is going to be spent on me. This time I was trying to go to the other side. I was trying to look up what was happening in Afghanistan. And they kind of made me look like an idiot, who took really big risks. So I just think that it was because I was not working in their sphere. That was their problem with it.
I interviewed Carsten Jensen also a while ago, and he was saying the same thing, that when he looked at the Afghan war, especially from a different perspective, somehow some Danes get very angry, Why do they want to have this only one version?
I think some of those Danes who are very unhappy with looking at other perspectives is because I think, they haven't thought it through. I think the reason why they're biased is because they've kind of they fell into a trap. Because the thing is that you have some politicians in Denmark who wants to make critical journalism about the war in Afghanistan look like unpatriotic. And they want it to look like that you are actually critical about the people who are sacrificing their lives, Danish soldiers in Afghanistan, and all the money is going in there. It's like you are not loyal towards these people. But this is not the truth, because I would say that the critical journalism, the journalists and authors like Carsten Jensen, the thing that we are doing is actually that we are actually trying to respect the money, the lives that are being spent and risked down there, because we want to know what they're used for. And the people who are actually risking their lives down there, whoever they are, they should be happy about us, because we can kind of reaffirm whether the work that they're doing is worth it, and whether they're being told the truth by the politicians about what they're doing down there. So in that regard, I would say that, for example, Carsten Jensen and me and other of my colleagues who have done some really critical journalism about the Danish presence down there, we are the best friends of the Danish soldiers, and not only the Danish soldiers, but also the Afghans, because we are trying to dig into the truth and find out how the things are going and how the problems can be solved.
Yes. And then from Afghanistan, then you put your attention on Syria and Gaza. You know? Do you have a death wish? These are all dangerous areas, Nagieb.
Yeah. No, I don't have a death wish, but I think that I'm mentally I'm quite strong, I can take it. I can take the risks, and I've managed to experience very rough things, but I managed to get through it without being traumatized. And at the same time, I have some tools, I have some access. I have, of course, I have my skills also, and I feel a responsibility to use these positive skills that I have in a good way. So the reason why I'm going to these places and trying to cover them very close is because I think it's extremely important for society, not only the Danish but also international society, to know what is happening.
Talking about international society, your work is also internationally recognized and you got many prizes. Then why not work for BBC or CNN and Al Jazeera instead of working here?
Yeah, I have almost all my work has been for the past 4 years have been international.
Okay.
So the things that have been screened on Danish TV is just Danish versions of my international work.
Okay.
So for example, the thing I did for Gaza, it was a documentary for Al Jazeera English, a special report.
Okay.
The thing I did from Syria recently, it was called Under Russia's Fist.
Oh,
and I did a Danish version for Politiken.
Okay.
But it was actually Al Jazeera who was funding it. 2 years ago, I did something for BBC Panorama called Inside the Taliban. And Horizont, they bought it and made a Danish version out of it.
Okay.
So a lot of people in Denmark, they actually don't know that my work is funded by international media. I wouldn't be able to do it if I did it as a freelancer for Danish media.
No, of course. Have you written a book also about your travels in the war zones?
Yes, I wrote a book called The Untold Story about the war in Afghanistan. In Danish, Historien der ikke bliver fortalt.
Okay.
And it's a book that shows the other side of the war, the side that the majority of the journalists never covered. The Afghan civilians' perspective in Helmand, who really experienced the worst sides of the war, and also the Taliban's version of the war, because I wanted to get beneath the skin of these, especially young men who fight for the Taliban, why they joined them, because you have these very stereotypical, demonized picture of these fighters that they're just extremists, all of them, and they just want to kill people, etc. My experience is that a lot of them, they have the choice between two evils, and sometimes the Taliban is the less of two evils. And there are reasons why they're going there. Not because they want the Taliban state, but simply because they have their backs against the wall. And that's like the choice that is most rational for them. So the book is very much about the reason why the war is going wrong.
I understand that you are also a film director. Then why not produce documentary about minority situation in Denmark and in other European countries?
Yeah, I've thought about doing that actually. I'm not ruling out that I will start doing it. I've just been very much focused on international politics for the past 5-6 years. I did a couple of docs about terrorism cases here in Denmark in 2009 and in 10 and 11. But since then, I've been very much attached to what's happening in Afghanistan and Syria, because I know people and I know that it's life and death down there.
True.
But I think it's very likely that I will start to do something possibly here in Denmark too soon.
The reason why I ask, because when I speak to some young people, they like your work, and they're very proud that there's a young man like you with their background, who's there. And also because ethnic minority need young role models, So you could be one of the role models. We have non-stop discussion in Denmark about ethnic minorities, about Muslims, about Islam. What do you think about that?
I think, that maybe that's one of the reasons I'm very much interested in the consequences of the war in Syria and Afghanistan, because of the tragedies down there. But maybe one of the reasons I'm seeking outside of Denmark is because sometimes you have very small things, and in Denmark they make big things out of them, and it's really frustrating. That, for example, recently you had somebody throwing eggs at a car, with students, and suddenly the story was about police and this and that, and it just sounded like a terrorism alert or something like that. It just went crazy. So the thing is that sometimes I really get tired of the level in the debate here in Denmark, and it just, it makes me very frustrated and depressed. And when I'm in Syria, I see misery. I see people who really feel, bad, and they really need some help, and it's really clear stuff. But up here, everything is very
problems.
It's kind of luxury problems. But I understand it, because when I stay in Denmark in 6 months, when I don't go down to Syria, the problems in Denmark, suddenly they look big to me, because we are human beings. We adapt to the society, and then the small problems, they're big for me too. So I think it's really difficult, I think, because I live here, and it's really close to me what is happening.
So because you live here, then I want to ask you, where do you see Denmark in 10, 20 years' time, especially socio-economical situation of minorities concerned?
Yeah. I think it's really difficult to say, but I think that Denmark right now is on the wrong path. I think there are a lot of populism in politics right now, and I think that the media is on the wrong path too. That we get driven towards stories, which doesn't have substance, instead of the stories with substances. I think we have big economical problems waiting in the future, and one of the reasons we have them is because journalists are much more focused on the small stuff, the populistic stuff, instead of the real stuff that can actually save Denmark's future.
Nagieb, thank you very much for your wonderful views.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that our audience have liked what Nagieb said, with a lot of experience he has, that we are people, and we should get the information we deserve, and we should have them. Until next week, take good care of yourself, and see you then.